There's only one type of Amiga that I personally always lusted after, and that was the dream of owning a big box Amiga. However, all I've got now is an Amiga 1200. What if I told you that you can convert it into a big box Amiga in the form of a tower? This was a super popular thing for people to do in the 90s, but before I show you my own take on this, let's take a trip down memory lane and talk a little bit more about Amiga itself. In the birth of the multimedia age, before the internet became widely available, people wanted CD-ROM drives, and they wanted them to access large libraries of software and to play music. They wanted sound cards for high fidelity sound. They wanted a computer that could play Doom.
These games are getting really realistic. Next year I might even play in the big Doom tournament.
In this age, Amiga went bust, and from a technical standpoint, without accelerator cards, were all but left behind. They lasted a little while through different acquisitions and the hope that the Amiga operating system would be ported to PowerPC. What we got though was not only confusing, but it's all wrapped up in a tangled web of messy patterns, a lot of finger pointing, and IP infringement that still goes on to this day. With everything stuck in a deadlock, the Amiga got left to the pages of history. What was left was a bunch of enthusiasts that didn't want to let the Amiga die. They wanted to hold on to the computers for as long as possible. They wanted networking, they wanted games, they wanted 3D acceleration, they wanted everything that a PC and a Mac could do at the time, and they wanted it in the form of an Amiga. Would you believe that right now you can have all of those things on classic Amiga hardware, and even after 30 years, it's still being actively developed. Not only is the community alive and kicking, they've made massive advancements in understanding how to make it better and more modern with something that can cost you as little as $35. That is assuming, of course, you have an Amiga to put it in. This is a cautious tale of how over a year ago, I decided that I wanted to convert my Amiga 1200 into a tower. I wanted to add PCI. I wanted to add Wi-Fi, and most of all, I wanted to add a CD-ROM drive. That was always my dream. What you're about to learn is that 35-year-old computers are expensive, and despite them being that age, people are willing to exploit idiots like me for money to make these old slow computers a little bit less slow, but a whole lot more fun. Me being me, I decided to take a little bit more of a bespoke route with my A1200, and I'm aware that there's plenty of pre-made cases that exist to support the A1200 in a tower form. I also know how much it costs to make a case, considering I've launched a commercial case before with Montech, I've designed cases with Cooler Master, and I'm not paying a couple €100 for a 10-year-old Fractal case with a custom motherboard tray and some I/O cutouts. That's just stupid. I can be an idiot and spend my money on other pointless bits that I'm doing. It's not pretty, well, at least not this version, but it works. What you're about to see is the first iteration of this build. It's changed quite a lot since I first started this project over a year ago, including a bunch of the hardware that you're about to see as well. Well, most of it is the same, but if you know how the A1200 is designed, the first thing you're thinking is, hey, how are you going to use a keyboard considering you're converting it to a tower and it's a wedge-style computer with a built-in keyboard? Well, this is where the RetroJoy AmiKey comes in. This plugs into the keyboard controller on the motherboard of the A1200 and intercepts the signal and allows you to use any USB keyboard as the primary keyboard while retaining the original keyboard connector on the motherboard, so you don't have to destroy your A1200 motherboard to use this. For this adapter, you can either use a USB extension cable or have a wireless keyboard dongle inside of your the wireless keyboard dongle inside your A1200, or you can physically wire in via the USB header, but the way I decided to do this is with an extension cable with a panel mount USB connector in place of where the RF modulator was. This is something I've never used on an A1200, so I desoldered the modulator years ago so I could have provisions for this, but you'll find out this is not how I use this USB port anymore. But for the first iteration, yeah, this is how it is. One of the most important things for me was the ability to have PCI cards. I know it's stupid for an A1200, but it's just something that I've always wanted to do. So this is the L-Box Mediator. This is the PCI 1200 TX Plus version. This is the latest version of this mediator, and I think I bought this probably over 12 months ago as the thing that really kick off this project. The reason why I wanted to use something like this is kind of important. It allows me to use either an AT or ATX power supply rather than trying to adapt something for the A1200. It just makes it a lot easier for powering the system, especially in its tower form. The way the mediator connects to the A1200 is it connects to the Zorro bus with a edge connector that connects into the expansion port on the A1200, and then the mediator kind of plugs into that. However, you still retain the expansion slot. It just pushes it further out. So if you're doing a towered Amiga 1200, yeah, you kind of can't use PCI in a wedge. It's impossible to do that. Speaking of expansions, I'm using probably the most popular expansion for the A1200 right now. This is the PiStorm 32 Lite with, I think this version here, I was using the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. However, I'm currently using the Raspberry Pi 4, whatever the top end one is at the moment. That's what I'm currently using. But I think when I filmed this, yeah, I wasn't using it. And there's reasons why I upgraded that we'll talk about in another video. But for this version, V1 we'll call it, yeah, that's what I'm using. Two things that I kept from my original wedge build of my A1200 was the Indivision AGA. This is the Mark III version, as well as the AmiKit Fast IDE adapter that allows me to connect basically any IDE device that I like to my Amiga, including optical drives, or more importantly, CD-ROM drives. It will also allow me to connect any IDE hard drive to this system as well, which I actually have a couple of, to be honest. Obviously, the first thing I wanted to do was completely disregard the Amiga's awesome audio and put in a proper sound card. This is something that I picked up from an estate sale that I purchased last year. This just happened to be compatible with the A1200. This is an Ensoniq ES1370 or the Sound Blaster 128 before it was the 128. That's right. Ensoniq was bought by Creative and it technically uses the same controller, and this card works. However, I did change the sound card later to something else. The funniest thing is, I had added wired networking to my A1200 with this Realtek RTL 8139C. This is a 100 megabit interface, but the way that the PiStorm changed and evolved after starting all this, I can use the Wi-Fi of the Raspberry Pi to get on the internet now. So this is technically not in the machine anymore, but yeah, I thought it was worth mentioning because I was using this for wired networking and it worked without any problems. I'd mentioned that I'd bought an estate sale sometime last year and there were so many TV tuner cards in the whole batch and all of them were compatible with the Amiga. So I have this in here essentially to route the graphics from the AGA chipset into the Amiga so I can use my graphics card, which for some reason I didn't film any B-roll of, but there is a very cool graphics card in my A1200. For the graphics card, I went with the ATI Radeon 9200 SE. It's PCI, and this card is kind of hard to come by. I searched for this for a while, and yeah, I turned out that I probably bought this card for maybe $80 US over a year ago. I pulled it out of the A1200 just to show you because I forgot to shoot B-roll of it. Ultimately, I would love to get my hands on a Voodoo 3, but those cards are insanely expensive. I've been trying to find one. Every time I've entered into an auction on eBay, I forgot that it was running, and then I don't have a Voodoo 3 for this system. In the spirit of fully modernizing this A1200, and yeah, I know, it takes away from the purity of the Amiga, whatever, I don't care. This is the Amiga A1200 USB mod from centurion-tech.eu. This is a little bit crappy now. There's a new revision that's much better. I bought this one about 4 years ago. It did the job. The scroll wheel doesn't work. I have to modify this and whatever. I might end up buying a new one. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I'm also looking at getting a USB card to address the mouse issue, but for now and currently this is what I'm using. I just don't want to spend too much more money on this because the people who make this Amiga stuff are charging through the nose and it's too much money and I don't agree with it. For video output, I have a few options. Obviously, as I already showed, I do have the Indivision AGA Mark III, so I can use either HDMI or VGA. Essentially what the Indivision does is it scan doubles everything from 15 kilohertz to 31 kilohertz. I can use it on any display, including HDMI as well, but it's not the only video output. Obviously, I've got a graphics card in here that I can use. I've got that Radeon card. Because I'm using a Pi Storm 32, I do have RTG or retargetable graphics through the built-in HDMI on the Raspberry Pi, which is honestly my preferred way of having any graphics output on my A1200 tower. But I wanted a graphics card anyway. I don't care. If I can do it, I'm going to do it. I guess it's time to show you this monstrosity of a modification that I made on this no-name case that I got from the estate sale that I purchased last year. I don't know what this case is. I don't care. It was really flimsy and was very easy to cut, which is kind of why I decided to use it. What I did here was I used some random power supply bracket that I had as well to have standard ATX power supply support. However, I did use an SFX power supply just to add a little bit of space saving. The version of this case right now, guys, is so much better than this. It's the same case, but the entire internal frame I've rebuilt. We'll cover that in another video. But yeah, this is how it is for now. It doesn't look pretty, but it does work. The trickiest part about all of this was lining up the PCI slot so everything could plug in, which, to be honest, with this iteration was not perfect. It really wasn't. It drove me a little bit mad. As for the other inputs and outputs for the back, I have a pass-through panel connector for the VGA from the Indivision AGA, so I can use multiple monitors as I'm trying to get stuff up and running. There's USB on the back here. This one is for the mouse, and then there's HDMI, which is the HDMI output from the Raspberry Pi. That's essentially just to use that RTG. Again, it's really not pretty, and the version of this modification is a lot better now, but yeah, this is how it was a year ago. Because we're doing some kind of modification, quite obviously, there has to be one knock to a fan in here, and there's an 80mm knock to a fan installed up the front. I thought this one was really cool. What I'd done here is I bought a drawer off eBay or Amazon or whatever for a 5¼ inch drive bay, and it slides out, and I have all of my SD cards and micro SD cards and CF cards stored in here, as well as this funky little ribbon cable. This is an extension cable from the micro SD card slot on the Raspberry Pi, which allows me to switch operating systems on the fly. I kind of double-sided taped it to the inside of here so I can just quickly switch out any installation of like Amiga OS or Caffeine OS or whatever it is that I'm trying to tinker with at that time. Yeah, I can swap that out really easily. And the keen-eyed out there will see that I used the original Commodore A1200 badge from my Amiga 1200, the original one. Yep, that's right. And I mounted that to the front of the drawer. Also, you will notice that there is something else hiding underneath that. I've got a 3.5-inch drive bay version of the GoTech for the A1200, and this is essential for loading floppy disk images for installing your operating system and any games that you want to play as well. I mean, you can do it inside Amiga OS or Workbench, but you know, sometimes you just want to boot the image up and play straight away right from the rip, and this is the way you do it. Plug a USB stick in the front and you're good to go. Those other USB ports that you're seeing on the front and the audio jacks at this point in time are not operational, but yeah, we'll chat about this in another video, like I keep saying. I know I said CD-ROM, but it had to be done. I've got this DVD-ROM drive here. This one is also a CD burner, so I can write stuff, but yeah, mainly for reading things like installing stuff from CD. Yeah, I can do that too. Can also play audio CDs from this. Man, this Amiga 1200 is so freaking cool. I really want to show you guys the newer version of this, but yeah, right now you you're going to be stuck with the year-old version. Just deal with it for now. Trust me, it's worth it. Let's get to building this thing so I can show you a couple of the things that I did to mount everything up here. So let's start off by dropping the whole motherboard in with the mediator installed, kind of lining it up with the standoff positions that I made inside of this. Like I said, guys, this is not pretty, but it does work here. And there's two standoffs that hold the whole motherboard in place for this, and it just does the thing. It's glorious, guys. I love it. It's so janky in this iteration. Look at it. It looks horrible. Next up, we're plugging in the micro SD extension cable that's in that front drawer. You know what happens when you slot it in. It just works. On the motherboard tray, you'll see that there's heaps of standoffs for mounting a whole bunch of the different parts of hardware that it's added to the Amiga. So the USB adapter for the mouse, instead of me plugging it straight into the motherboard, because I wanted to make the case a little bit shorter, or rather I didn't want a big case, I decided to go this path and mount it directly to the motherboard tray, and then I plugged that USB cable in and we're good to go. You'll also notice in this clip that there's fans plugged into the mediator. The mediator has two DC fan power connectors as well as the power switch connector for ATX power supplies. But back to that USB mouse adapter, I made up a custom ribbon cable so I could move that to a different location. This is a 10-pin connector and it just pops in and it's good to go. It's not pretty, but it works. And actually, the current iteration of this also does the same thing. The little breakout board for HDMI and VGA from the Indovision AGA also mounts in a similar fashion. And this is just the easiest way to do it. I've got a short VGA cable that plugs in here. It plugs into that bottom panel along with the HDMI and everything else. It's not like that anymore. It's much more sophisticated, I would say. On top of that, there's the breakout board for the fast IDE adapter, which gives us two IDE ports as well as the 44-pin IDE in case you wanted to use a CF adapter, and a connection from the Gale chip for the buffered IDE as well. There's a bit of a story with this. Yeah, one of the cables caught fire and burnt my finger. It was a whole thing, and it's not mounted like this anymore. I can guarantee you the way I've done it now is much cooler. And probably by the time that this video comes out, I probably own a 3D printer by now. I don't know. I don't know when this is coming out. Because this is an Amiga 1200, you need some spinning rust. You just need it for the sound. So I've got this 40 gig Seagate drive that I had laying around. In fact, I've got about probably 100 of these drives, let's be honest. And yeah, this is just in there for the sound and just loading things off the drive to give us that authentic OG computer flavor. Next up is the power supply on this really janky and flexible bracket. This is from a Cooler Master case that I kind of adapted to make fit in here. And you know, I talked about case design and all this stuff. This is really janky. This is basically to get the idea of where I wanted things to go in the first iteration. So yeah, using an SFX power supply here with an ATX to SFX adapter to make life a whole lot easier and to add some extra space. The final version of this case is kind of similar now, but yeah, you'll see that in the next part, whenever that comes. I don't know. I don't make the rules. Finally, I'm installing the expansion cards. At this point, the Radeon that I'd bought hadn't turned up yet, so all we're doing right now is installing the tuner card, installing the Ethernet adapter, and then the sound card, all of which will not work without a graphics card because it uses the video memory as some kind of funky buffer to make it all work, because LBox and their weird proprietary things. Oh, I love how LBox does things. It makes lots of sense. Not. Here's the deal with all this Amiga stuff. People take this Amiga stuff way too seriously, and I just want to have some fun playing with a computer that I have lots of memories with and turning it into something that I could have only possibly have dreamed of having when I was growing up. Who doesn't want a towerized A1200? Yeah, I know that Amiga 4000s and 3000s exist. Trust me, I've tried to buy one. They're just too expensive and people are trying to resell them for way too much money, which is why I just don't have one. Now, what's next for this A1200 tower? Well, I still want a Voodoo 3 for it. Who doesn't want to have a Voodoo 3 in their Amiga? It's kind of like the holy grail because you can run 3D accelerated titles on your Amiga and all that. Plus, with the PyStorm, it just makes it really, really epic and super fast. Obviously, there's some things that are missing from the PyStorm that will hopefully come in the future, but for now, it's perfectly adequate. It does everything that I needed to do, and it does everything relatively well. The other thing is, I didn't want to show this system up and running yet because in the form that you saw it from this footage a year ago, it worked and it was fine, but it's way cooler now. So when I get around to showing you exactly how it is now, it's going to make more sense as to why I didn't show this as a complete running system later on. I hope this all makes sense to you guys, and I hope you're not too disappointed. But again, this is just the first part in a bunch of videos with this A1200 tower build. I cannot wait to show you more. The other thing is, this isn't the end of what I want to do with the A1200. Now, you haven't seen it yet, but I've rebuilt the entire inside of the chassis out of aluminium, so it is much higher quality, much stronger. It's easier to measure and to replicate, and I'm actually in the process of getting an FLP02 from Silverstone and doing the same thing again in a case that looks more error appropriate with much better compatibility for cooling and whatnot. So yeah, stick around for all that stuff. You guys know how this works. I'm Nick. This is Printed Circuit Board, and I hope you've enjoyed this bit of a, I guess it's an A1200 project. There's more to come with this. I do want to share more of what I've got going on with it. But like I said, I filmed most of the B-roll and everything over a year ago, and there's stuff that I forgot to film. In fact, the truth is, the version that you saw in this video is really the second iteration, not the first. It was the first iteration of me being happy with showing how it is. The first version was way jankier. The version you're seeing is still janky, but the newer one is not.